As winter gave way for spring in Australia, Saturday, September 20th, 2025, saw 5917 providing 3 shuttle trips from Richmond to Mulgrave in Sydney's northwest by the Picnic Train. As part of its shuttle trips, we see the locomotive pulling in at Clarendon to make way for a Richmond-bound electric set coming in from Sydney. Also on the same day was the Clarendon Classic Rally, which was held at the Hawkesbury River Showground next to the station. As the Richmond-bound electric set pulls in, 5917 heads off to Mulgrave. .4836 from Juni Railway Workshop provided assistance for the shuttle trips. Nearby is a vintage double-decker bus from Sydney Road Transport Museum at Oakville in the city of Hawkesbury, who is providing its own shuttle rides for passengers to the Classic Rally. The bus would now leave the rally at Clarendon as it makes its way to Richmond. As we await for the engine on its return journey, we see a Sydney Trains A set pulling in to pick up weekend commuters as it makes its way to Sydney. .4836 now leads the Picnic Train back to Richmond. At Richmond, 5917 was being looked on, while passengers bought their turn on the last shuttle trip for the day. Meanwhile, another ace set is seen pulling in from Sydney. We say farewell to Richmond and see 5917 pulling in at Mulgrave on its final run for the day. .4836 once again leaves the train back to Richmond. We now move to Vineyard to await 5917 on its transfer run to Riverstone. Vineyard Station was built in 1935 as an infill station. The station seen here had been rebuilt in 1991 when the line to Richmond had been electrified. Its pre-1991 rebuild with a corrugated shelter can be seen in the 1985 music video No Promises by Australian rock band Icehouse. After seeing a few electrics, 5917 now makes its way to Riverstone, where it and its train will stable there for the rest of the afternoon before heading on to Sydney that night. It would come back to do 3 more shuttle trips from Richmond to Mulgrave on Sunday, September 21st. We now move to Sydney Central Station on Friday, September 26, 2025, to celebrate 170 years of the first train in New South Wales that ran from Sydney to Parramatta on September 26, 1855. In celebration of the occasion, and to hype up the upcoming Transport Heritage Expo for the October long weekend as a media preview, Transport Heritage New South Wales, with the assistance of Transport for New South Wales and Sydney Trains, ran a special parallel run to celebrate with 3526, Red Rattler F1, and the latest addition to Sydney Trains, the Marayung Intercity set, also known as the D set, all representing the evolution of New South Wales Railways. Here is an example of the Marayung set pulling in with passengers. The word Marayung means emu, from the Australian Aboriginal language of the Yuin Kurdic language from the Darug people that was traditionally spoken in the region of Sydney and New South Wales until it became extinct due to the effects of colonialism. Since the 1990s, efforts were made by some descendants of the Darug clans in Western Sydney to revive the language. Today, some modern Darug speakers gave speeches in a reconstructed form of the Darug language, and younger members of the community visit schools and give demonstrations of spoken Darug. In 2014, the New South Wales government announced its intention to purchase the new set for the Intercity network, then operated by New South Wales Trainlink, replacing the V and H sets, the latter of which would take on suburban services of Sydney Trains, while the V set ran its course on the Central Coast and Newcastle line until June 27, 2025. The D-sets were developed by South Korean railway manufacturer Hyundai Rotem at their Changwon factory, and the first 2 sets were delivered in December 2019, with tests being carried out in January 2020. After disputes between the state government and the Rail, Tram and Bus Union between 2018 to 2022 in regards of safety concerns involving the D-sets, the new sets entered service in December 2024 on the Central Coast and Newcastle line. Red Rattler F1 is now seen pulling into Central ready for the run to Parramatta. Meanwhile, an empty Mariang set departs Central. Later on, 4201 pulls in with 3526. As the loco sits awaiting for its passengers to board, media personnel from major media institutions had gathered around the 35, ready to make their bulletin for the nightly news. The time has come now for the 35 class locomotive to depart on the exact time the first train left Sydney for Parramatta at 11:27 a.m. Next up is Red Rattler F1. The two trains will meet up with the Marayung set further down the line. Later on, we see Red Rattler F1 sitting on platform 2, while 4201 leads the train and 3526 into Central from Parramatta. After passengers disembarked from the train, the 35 class loco will now make its way back to Thirlmere. To conclude the segment, F1 will now make its way to Flemington. During the October long weekend, Transport Heritage New South Wales had once again hosted their popular Transport Heritage Expo in Sydney, featuring vintage buses, displays, the Central Station Clock Tower tour, railcar rides to Waterfall, and of course steam train rides to Hurstville. The locomotives providing shuttles were 3526 and 3001, who last ran on the main line in 1996, nearly 30 years ago. On Saturday, October 4th, 2025, the two locos had completed in the Great Train Race from Sydney to Hurstville to close off day one of the Expo. The last time the Expo held a race was back in 2019, when the Expo used to be a fixture during the Queen's birthday long weekend in June, prior to the outbreak of COVID in 2020. To see more of our coverage of the Expo, link to the video can be found in the description. Between September to October, 5917 had conducted some picnic train trips to Kiama. On Sunday, September 28, 2025, we see the locomotive charging through Carlton, with Juni Railway Works' 4836 providing assistance at the rear. The chalk writing on 5917's smokebox door was the picnic train's commemoration for the 170th anniversary of the New South Wales Railways. On Sunday, October 5th, we now move to Tempe, the train's departure point on its second journey to Kiama during the October long weekend. Before we see the locomotive depart, we captured some Tangara trains coming through the station. This first Tangara set is running an all-stop service, as we see it pulling into Woolai Creek. The next set is running a limited service as it makes its way to Sydney. And another limited service passing through, heading south. Next up is a South Coast service heading for Kiama, led by an H-set. We see two more T-sets passing through. This one is seen heading for Sydney, while the next one heads down south. With passengers boarded and the path cleared, 5917 now heads for Kiama once again. In the twilight hours of daylight savings, which started on the same day as well, 5917 passes through Moordale after dropping off passengers at Sutherland as it makes its way back to Tempe. We come to the second last Kiama Picnic Train service on Saturday, October 18th at Hurstville to see 5917 passing through after departing Sydney's Central Station.
stations to Walleye Creek, then Techney, Sydenham, Redfern, Central, Town Hall.
The picnic train's 4903 is seen at the back of the train assisting.
And Bondi Junction.
Later in the day, we see the 59 class loco passing through Oatley on its return run to Sydney. We now come to the final Kiama Picnic Train for the year 2025, on Sunday, October 19th, NC 5917 charging through Carlton from Kogarah. Now here is something that is quite rare to see on Rail Run New South Wales. A steam train running through Ottawa at the crack of dawn on Saturday, October 25th, 2025. Something that would have been a common sight during the days of working steam in New South Wales and days of old, as 5917 makes its way to Wollongong on the south coast of New South Wales to get ready to run shuttle trains from Wollongong to Scarborough later in the day, and on Sunday, October 26. 4903 is seen behind the loco assisting, and will also be assisting the shuttle trains too. As the sun sets on Sunday, October 26, we see the 59 heading its way back to Chullora, led by 4903 at Carlton. Despite that 5917 will be doing shuttle trips from Gosford to Hawkesbury in the Central Coast in December, and the picnic train doing trips in the Hunter Valley and Central Coast in November with R766 and its vintage diesels, this is where we say hooroo to 5917 and the picnic train for the 2025 steam season. After its brief stint on the main line in Sydney during the October long weekend, 3001 is now back at Thirlmere on Sunday, November 2nd, 2025, providing shuttle trains for patrons of the New South Wales Rail Museum to Buxton. Here we see the locomotive passing through Kurrajard. Next, we arrive at Buxton. After the locomotive had been uncoupled, we noticed that the station had been updated with a pedestrian walkway. As 3001 pulls up to the other side of its train, we also see another update to the grounds of Buxton Railway Station, which is the Buxton Fire Safe Gardens created by Buxton Landcare. The idea for the creation of a fire-safe garden stems from Buxton's experience of the Black Summer bushfires of 2019 to 2020. The gardens were to demonstrate thoughtful landscaping to reduce the risk of bushfires. After looking around at the gardens, 3001 now departs Buxton for Thirlmere. At Thirlmere, 3001 pulls in, and will now make its way to the front once again for its last shuttle train for the day. We see the locomotive heading off to Buxton once again, this time from the platform of the New South Wales Rail Museum's main hall. It's the second last day of steam on the main line for the year on Saturday, November 8th, 2025. And after a well-earned break from the Transport Heritage Expo in Sydney during October, 3526 was out and about on the Illawarra line heading to Wollongong. The locomotive is seen passing through Engadine and Sydney South after collecting booked passengers at Sutherland Station. Our next stop is Bulli, and before we see the 35 coming through, we see an Australian iron and steel brake van and a Corrimal Balgownie mine, Corrimal coal and coke timber coal wagon outside of the Bulli Black Diamond District Heritage Centre. The Hudswell Clark & Co. built locomotive South Bulli No. 2 was placed here on display with the wagon since 1995. Prior to that, it was donated to the Australian Railway Historical Society New South Wales Division by South Bulli Colliery in 1965, and was then handed over to them in Sydney in 1966, and was put on display at the Enfield site of the New South Wales Rail Transport Museum until it was evicted in 1974. From there, the loco was arranged by the Australian Railway Historical Society to move it to Albion Park, home of the Illawarra Light Railway and Museum Society. In May 2025, the locomotive was transferred to Transport Heritage New South Wales' Chullora hub for safekeeping from the harsh weathers of Mother Nature, given that the locomotive, according to Transport Heritage New South Wales, is now the world's oldest surviving Hudswell Clark-built locomotive. Hopefully one day it will be reunited with its wagons. 3526 is now passing through as it nears Wollongong, after dropping off some of its booked passengers at Scarborough and Audible. At Wollongong, 3526 leaves its carriages at the station as it prepares to turn itself around on the circular loop at Port Kembla, ready for its return run to Sydney, while rain came down on us. Thankfully, it was short-lived after filming. Later in the day, 3526 is seen at Taraji on its return run, while an outer suburban set thankfully passed through beforehand with weekend commuters heading as far as Kiama. We now come to the last mainline steam tour by Transport Heritage New South Wales for the year 2025 on Sunday, November 9th, as 3526 makes 3 trips to Hurstville with the Audible Express to celebrate the launch of Harry Potter, the full cast audio editions released by Audible on Amazon. The train was sponsored by the Daily Telegraph. We see the loco passing through Carlton, and this time, unlike the October long weekend, no freight train had blocked our view. During the journey, passengers were given headphones to give them an immersive experience of the first audiobook on board the train. 4916 is seen at the back of the train assisting, and is now leading the first train back to Sydney. 3526 is now seen passing through Alloa heading for Hurstville once again, with its second last train of the day. (4916) once again leads the train back to Sydney. As we always say, trains must get through Heritage Train or not. Although the 35 will be doing a third trip, this is where we say hooroo to 3526 for the 2025 steam season. We return to Sydney Central Station on Saturday, November 29th, 2025, and before we see 4306 and 4001 pulling into Sydney from Thirlmere, we see a line of CountryLink XPTs in the station. This first unit is bound for Melbourne, Victoria. The next set is seen heading for Casino, the border town between New South Wales and Queensland. This set is heading for Dubbo in New South Wales' Central West. And the last one is seen heading for the XPT Service Centre near Sydenham. 4001 is now seen leading 4306 into Central, and will now get ready for shunting so 4306 can lead the train to Newcastle. "4306 is one of the 6 members of the 43 class fleet built by A. Gonin and Co. at Broadmeadow in 1957. In the class's early days, they were often seen hauling the Central West and Intercapital Daylight Express trains, as well as the Melbourne and Brisbane Limited, Brisbane Express and Newcastle Flyer services. In between those trains, they also worked freight as well. But by 1957, when the Class 44s were introduced to the railways, the 43s were given less important roles. The 43s weren't popular with crews, such as fumes sneaking into the cab and shortcomings within their design that became a problem in keeping them operational. 4306 is the sole survivor of the 43 class fleet. After it was withdrawn from public service in 1979, it was delivered to the then New South Wales Rail Transport Museum, now New South Wales Rail Museum, in 1980, and after years as a museum piece in Thirlmere, it was restored by the Illawarra division of the museum at the Electricity Commission Switchyard at Yalla near Wollongong and the Illawarra starting in 1987, and returned to service in 1996. With passengers on board, the 2 Heritage diesels will now head for Newcastle. Next day, Sunday, November 30th, we see the two locos at Central once again, as this time they'll be making their way to Hawkesbury River in the Central Coast. 4001, built by the Montreal Locomotive Works in Canada in 1951, had two moments that hold significance in its working life, such as being the very first diesel locomotive to operate in New South Wales, and in 1954 hauled the Royal Train during Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's first ever Australian tourist queen with her late husband Prince Philip. In honour of that, 4001, along with sister engine 4002, were painted in royal blue, as seen here from their verdant green, and after the royal tour, it was replaced with Indian red. 4001, along with its siblings, hauled heavy goods from Sydney to Broadmeadow, and later on North Coast services to Brisbane and Albury on the main South Line. Withdrawal for the locos started in 1968, with the last one withdrawn in 1971, 20 years since these engines were in service. A total of 20 were made, but 3 survived into preservation. 4001 returned to service in 2010. Meanwhile, 4002 and 4006 were sold to the Robe River Iron Associates to help with construction trains, later as shunters in the Pilbara region of Western Australia, until they were withdrawn in 1979. 4002 was donated to the Pilbara Railways Historical Society, and 4006 was donated to the Lions Club in Wickham, and is now placed on a plinth at the Tourist Information Bay. With passengers on board, the two diesels will now take their final heritage train for Transport Heritage New South Wales's 2025 season.
Holders up. Please stand behind the yellow line. Please stand clear.
With Christmas looming, the picnic train ran a special Christmas picnic train with their diesel locomotives between Saturday, December 20th and Sunday, December 21st, 2025 to Kiama in the Illawarra South Coast. Here we see 4903 and 4836 passing through Allawarra on Saturday after departing from Tempe. Then we see it passing us at Banksia on its return journey.
Tempe, Sydenham, Redfern, Central, Town Hall, Martin Place, King's Cross, Edgecliff and Bondi Junction.
On the Sunday, we see the two locos heading for Kiama once again, this time passing through Mortdale. For this run, passengers will not only enjoy their day out at Kiama, but will also enjoy their time at the ever-popular Kiama Seaside Market, which happens every third Sunday each month. For more information, link is in the description. With that, this trip marks the end of the New South Wales Rail Heritage season for 2025. We hope that you enjoyed our coverage of the season, and will return soon to cover many Rail Heritage trips for the year 2026.